I sat in church with my hands full of love, little gifts I made for my grandbabies. She snatched them, unwrapped them in front of the whole congregation and said it loud. "This is poor people's trash." And my son? He stood there and said nothing. But I had one thing she didn't know about, something my late husband left behind. And by the time they found out how rich I'd become, I had already cut them off. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. I spent 3 weeks hand-stitching those scarves. Little things, nothing fancy, soft yarn I'd collected over the year, some patterned fabric ends I saved from old quilts. One was forest green with gold trim for Brandon, my oldest grandbaby, who loves to pretend he's in those adventure movies. I added a little compass charm to the edge. For Zoe, the youngest, I made a sky blue one with white stars, just like the pajamas she never wanted to take off when she was little. And for Madison, the middle one, I sewed a lavender scarf with a tiny hidden pocket. She loves secrets, that girl. I wrapped each one carefully with brown craft paper and red ribbon. Tucked in little notes with my handwriting. Notes that said things like, "You make my heart brighter," and "This world is softer because you're in it." I even baked a dozen mini pecan pies to go with them. Those were Samuel's recipe and the kids always loved them when they were small. I didn't have much money this Christmas. Truth be told, I never do. But I've always believed a handmade gift is worth more than anything with a price tag. It means someone sat down and gave you their time. That's the most valuable thing we've got left when we get old. The plan was to hand the gifts out after the Christmas Eve service. Not during all the fuss and singing, just after, when folks are hugging goodbye and gathering their coats. I figured I'd pull the kids aside, hand them their packages, maybe get a few smiles before they ran off into the night with their parents. But Candace had other plans. That evening I arrived early to church. Wore my best coat, the navy one with the fur collar Samuel bought me in '96. Sat in the same pew I always do, second from the front on the left side. Candace and Lawrence arrived late, just before the opening hymn. She didn't look at me. She never does unless there's something to criticize. After the service, when everyone was mingling and laughing under the warm yellow lights, I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the packages. I was so excited. Nervous even. It felt like I was giving them pieces of my heart. I walked over to where the children were gathered near the nativity table and gently called them over. "Brandon, sweetheart, this one's for you. Zoe, here's yours. Maddie, this one's got a little surprise pocket." That's when Candace stepped in. She reached out, snatched the packages from their hands and looked at them like they were covered in mud. "What is this?" she said loudly. Too loudly. Her voice carried across the room. "Just little gifts," I said, forcing a smile. "Something I made for the children." Candace let out a dry laugh. "Homemade scarves. Are you serious?" Several heads turned. I felt my stomach drop. "In this economy, Martha? You really thought this was appropriate? They don't need junk from a dollar bin wrapped in pity. We are not raising them to accept poor people's trash." Trash. He said it right there. In God's house. I looked to Lawrence. My son. My baby boy. I waited for him to say something. Anything. To defend me. To put a hand on her shoulder and say, "That's enough, Candace. Not here. Not to my mother." For a fleeting second his eyes met mine, a flicker of something, shame? Regret? Before he looked down at his shoes, like a little boy who'd broken a window and didn't want to admit it. But he said nothing. Not a word. The children stood frozen, their faces pale and confused. Zoe's lip trembled. Madison clutched the corner of her coat. And Brandon just looked angry in a way no 12-year-old should ever have to. Candace dropped the packages onto the nearest pew, like they were something foul she didn't want to touch. "Next year just stick to cards," she added. "If you can afford the stamps." Then she turned and walked off. I stood there in the middle of that crowded church, surrounded by Christmas lights and gospel music and people pretending not to stare. I couldn't move. My heart beat so loud I couldn't hear the choir anymore. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. I picked up the packages with shaking hands, tucked them back into my tote bag, and slipped out the side exit before anyone could stop me. When I got home I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat at the kitchen table in the dark, coat still on, tote bag on the floor beside me. Samuel would have said something. He would have marched right up to her and said, "Don't talk to my wife like that." But Samuel was gone. 6 years now. And Lawrence had inherited none of his backbone. That night I sat up going through old drawers. Not because I was looking for anything in particular, but because I couldn't sleep. I needed to busy my hands or else I'd cry, and once that dam broke I wasn't sure I'd stop. I found a shoebox with Samuel's old paperwork. Insurance forms. A folded-up birthday card he never gave me. And near the bottom, a thick yellowed envelope labeled, Certificate of Ownership, 1997. It had his handwriting on it. I opened it confused. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Stock ownership. Some company I'd never heard of. A tech something. I nearly tossed it aside. But something, some little whisper of Samuel's voice in the back of my mind, told me to wait. I smoothed the paper out gently, laid it flat on the kitchen table and read it again. And that was the first night I started to wonder. Maybe what they called trash wasn't trash at all. Maybe it was treasure. And maybe, just maybe, they'd messed with the wrong old woman. The next morning I woke up with that same tight feeling in my chest. You know the kind, like a hand squeezing your heart every time you remember what you should have said but didn't. I didn't eat breakfast. Didn't even make my coffee. I just sat at the kitchen table in my robe with that old stock certificate right in front of me like it might grow legs and explain itself. I didn't understand it, not completely. All I knew was that it was from 1997, and Samuel's name was on it in that neat, slanted handwriting of his. The company name was unfamiliar, something about tech, Bayline Systems Incorporated, but Samuel always read those investment newsletters back in the day. Always said, "One day Mar will get a surprise in the mail and it'll all be worth it." I didn't believe him then. Thought it was a dream. Something to pass the time now that his heart was slowing down and the house had grown quieter without the kids. I got dressed, brushed my hair, grabbed my tote and carefully folded the certificate into a folder. Then I walked 2 blocks down to the public library. The young man at the help desk looked about 12, but he smiled kindly when I asked for help looking something up online. I told him the company name and showed him the certificate. His eyebrows lifted. "Ma'am, I think you might want to call a brokerage firm." What now?" "A stockbroker. This company merged with another company back in 2012. That stock, it's real. And it's not small." My palms went clammy. I scribbled down the name of the brokerage he recommended and walked straight to the bus stop. Didn't even stop for lunch. It took the rest of the day, calls, hold music, transfers, but by 5 o'clock I had my answer. The certificate was still valid. And because of that merger and a stock split years ago and some kind of dividend reinvestment Samuel had signed up for, the shares were now worth just over $2.6 million. 2.6. I wrote the number down 3 times on the back of an envelope just to make sure it was real. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window. The Christmas lights on my neighbor's house blinked red and green, but all I could see was white. Everything in me went quiet. Numb even. That little piece of paper Candace probably would have called trash had just changed the rest of my life. And they didn't know a thing. I made one decision right then. I wasn't going to tell Lawrence or Candace. Not a word. Not a hint. Not even a slip of the tongue at dinner. They had shown me exactly what they thought I was worth. And I intended to show them in time exactly what that cost them. Over the next few months, while they lived in their ignorance, I began quietly building my fortress. The next day I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A sharp, no-nonsense woman named Simone Keyes, recommended by Cassandra Wynne, the same attorney who helped Eunice from church a while back. Simone came to my home wearing a winter coat that looked more expensive than my whole wardrobe, and she brought a warmth with her I wasn't expecting. She didn't ask stupid questions. She didn't treat me like a senile old woman. She sat down, looked me in the eye and said, "You ready to take control of your life?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. We opened a new account, secured the assets, updated my will and started planning a trust. My trust. One that would protect that money from vultures and freeloaders, and put every penny toward things that mattered. That night I took the kids' scarves back out of the tote bag. I rewrapped each one in gold paper this time, better than what I'd used before. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I labeled each one with a note. "For your future. Love, Grandma." I knew what I was going to do now. I wasn't just going to enjoy this money. I was going to build with it. Build peace. Build distance. Build a legacy that skipped right over the ungrateful and went straight to the innocent. The children. Lawrence called me 2 days later, acting like nothing happened. Said, "Hey Ma, we're thinking of stopping by for New Year's. Candace wants to bring wine. You good with that?" I looked at the phone. Thought about answering. Thought about confronting him, asking why he didn't say a word while his wife embarrassed me in front of the entire church. But I didn't. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. Something short. "Guess you're busy." Okay. Candace never called. Of course she didn't. They didn't know they'd already had their last holiday at my table. Simone came by again to finish the trust paperwork. I handed her a separate envelope, one with instructions to set up college funds for each of the grandchildren, managed by a third-party trustee. Candace and Lawrence wouldn't have access to a dime. No loopholes, I told Simone. If they so much as ask for gas money, I want that clause airtight. She smiled. Oh, we'll make it ironclad. Later that week, I bought myself a sewing machine. One of the good ones. I'd been eyeing it for years but never could justify the cost. I also signed up for a quilting retreat up in the mountains. 3 nights, all meals included, a private cabin with a fireplace. I had plans now. Dreams again. And not a single one of them included Lawrence or Candace. They tried to shame me over a handmade scarf. They had no idea what I was stitching together behind the scenes. But they were going to find out. I never thought wealth would feel this quiet. No sudden rush. No loud laughter. No confetti falling from the ceiling. Just me in my living room, sipping warm lemon tea with Samuel's old record player humming in the background. Billie Holiday's voice poured out slow and smooth like molasses. And there I sat with a bank statement in one hand and a bowl of fabric scraps in the other, wondering how a single piece of paper had flipped my world inside out. I hadn't told anyone. Not my neighbor, not the ladies from my prayer circle, not even my sister Darlene, who lives 2 states over and would have screamed with joy. The only ones who knew were me, Simone, and the young banker who shook my hand like I was royalty the day I moved the funds into my name. It felt sacred to keep it to myself for now. Like a seed just planted, still hidden beneath the soil. Lawrence kept calling. Not every day but enough to keep up the performance. He texted a photo of the kids unwrapping expensive gifts. Some kind of gaming console, fancy noise-canceling headphones, a leather-bound journal that I doubt any of them asked for. Not a single mention of my scarves. Not a thank you. Not even a fake one. Candace stayed silent. I figured she'd told her side of the story to a few church folks already. Probably painted me as a bitter, oversensitive old woman who couldn't take a joke. Let her talk. The ones who mattered saw what she did that night. They heard her voice echo across the sanctuary. They saw my face afterward. And those same people would hear about what came next, too. But I wasn't rushing. No, I was planning. That's what they don't tell you about old age. You get better at patience. You learn to time your steps. And right now I was letting the silence work in my favor. I met with Simone again and finalized the structure of the trust. We made it so tight not even a lawyered-up vulture like Candace could poke holes in it. The kids, Brandon, Madison, and Zoe, would each receive access when they turned 25. No early withdrawals. No parental interference. The funds would go straight into their hands. Their future was protected. Then we tackled my will. It felt strange, sitting in a conference room while Simone read back my own words to me. All remaining assets, real estate, and investments shall be held exclusively for the benefit of the grandchildren, and not their parents, who are disinherited in full due to emotional abuse and public humiliation inflicted upon the testator. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I want. She looked me in the eye. You sure you don't want to leave them anything? Even a symbolic amount? I thought about it. And then I said, no. Not a penny. Not a memory. They made their choice in that church. It wasn't just about the scarves. It was about the way Lawrence looked away. The way he let Candace speak for both of them. The way he'd let her carve out pieces of me one comment at a time and acted like it was harmless. He knew better. He was raised better. And he still stood there and let me be humiliated. So no. No mercy. Only truth. One night about 2 weeks later I got a voicemail from Candace. I nearly dropped my cup hearing her voice. I hadn't expected her to reach out at all. Hi Martha, she said, sugary and stiff. I wanted to check in. We noticed you've been a little distant since Christmas. Lawrence says you're not answering his calls and the kids miss you. I just hope we can clear the air. Maybe talk things through. No hard feelings. No hard feelings. I played the voicemail again. Then again. Each time it sounded faker. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat at my desk that night and wrote 3 letters. One to each grandchild. Nothing dramatic. Just a few words to remind them who I was. That I loved them. That sometimes grown-ups do bad things, but love doesn't stop just because people mess up. I sealed the letters, put them in a box with the scarves, and gave Simone instructions to deliver them on each child's 18th birthday. Along with a simple message, your real gift is still growing. Grandma never forgot you. I booked another trip after that. This time to Colorado, a quiet little spot with snowy cabins and hot springs. I'd never seen real snow fall in the mountains. Always wanted to. At the airport, I sat by the window and watched families hustle past. Suitcases rolling, kids whining, parents snapping. I saw a grandmother holding a toddler's hand and couldn't help smiling. That used to be me. Maybe it would be again someday. But not with Lawrence. Not with Candace. They'd burned that bridge with their own hands. I was no longer angry, not like I was. That fire had cooled into something sharper, something cleaner. A kind of cold resolve that made me feel for the first time in years like I was standing tall in my own skin. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let the truth speak for itself. And when it did, they'd feel it. I didn't used to think of myself as powerful. I was a church secretary for 27 years. A wife. A mother. I budgeted grocery lists to the penny, stretched one chicken into 3 meals, and wore shoes until they pinched my toes. My whole life was about making do. But now, walking through the lobby of First Bank Holdings with Simone at my side, I realized something. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it walks quietly in soft heels and a pressed wool coat. Sometimes it's an older woman with good posture, a sharp lawyer, and the kind of silence that makes other people nervous. We were there to finalize everything. The trust, the will, the financial safeguards. Every dollar from Samuel's forgotten investment was now safe, untouchable, and future-proofed for the grandchildren. Every document was signed with clean ink in a steady hand. Simone smiled as we exited the building. You ready to live for yourself now? I looked at her and said, I was always ready. I just didn't think I was allowed. She nodded. You are now. I didn't go home right away. I walked around the park near the courthouse, hands tucked into my coat pockets. It was quiet. And yet I'd never felt so warm in my life. They didn't know yet. Lawrence and Candace. They were still living in their world of assumptions, believing I was small, bitter, barely getting by. They thought I was still that fragile woman sitting in the pew while they tore me apart in front of the congregation. Let them think it. Let them live in that delusion a little longer. I had something they'd never understand. Peace. And a plan. It was time to let them know. Carefully, strategically, and without any tears. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to inform them like a banker explains a foreclosure, like a judge reads a sentence. I asked Simone to deliver the notice. A formal letter, legally worded and airtight. Not dramatic, just final. In it, I explained the following. That due to their public humiliation and repeated devaluation of my presence and my love, I had amended my estate. That they were no longer beneficiaries of any kind. That every asset had been secured in an irrevocable trust, solely for the grandchildren, with independent oversight to prevent any parental interference. That effective immediately, I was cutting off all financial, emotional, and personal contact. They would not be welcome in my home, nor included in any future holidays, celebrations, or moments of significance. And that I wished them well. Simone sent it via certified mail. I didn't ask her to text me when it arrived. I didn't need to. 2 days later, Lawrence showed up at my doorstep. He didn't knock right away. I saw him through the front window, standing there in his pea coat, shifting on his feet like a boy sent to the principal's office. Then finally, a slow, heavy knock. I opened the door, but not the screen. Hi, Ma. Lawrence. I didn't know. About the stock. About any of this. No, you didn't. You never asked what your father left behind. You were too busy rolling your eyes at my Christmas gifts. He looked down, ashamed but still not sorry. Candace was out of line, he said. I admit that. And you said nothing. He paused. What do you want me to say now? I stared at him for a long time. It's not about what I want you to say. It's about what you let happen. What you showed me. You let your wife humiliate me in church. You watched your children look confused and hurt and you did nothing. I raised you better than that. Samuel raised you better. His face flushed. This doesn't have to be forever. It already is, I said. You made that choice when you stood silent. Now I'm making mine. He swallowed hard. So that's it. I nodded. That's it. He didn't yell. Didn't cry. He just stood there stunned. Like the floor had dropped out beneath him. I didn't feel joy in that moment. I felt relief. Like letting go of a rope that's been burning your hand too long. Tell the kids I love them, I said softly. And that I've made sure their future is safe. No matter what. He didn't reply. He just turned and walked down the steps slower than he came. I closed the door. Locked it. And sat down in the chair Samuel used to nap in on Sunday afternoons. For the first time in years I felt the house breathe again. The next day I booked another trip. This one was to Italy. Florence to be exact. I'd always wanted to see the cathedrals, the hills, the painted ceilings that looked like dreams. I didn't ask permission. I didn't tell anyone. I just booked it. And in the quiet days that followed, I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real, deep belly laugh. Right there in my kitchen while pouring syrup on waffles. Because I remembered what Candace called my gifts. She said they were trash. But I had turned that trash into a future. Into freedom. And they'd never get a piece of it. I always knew Candace had a sharp tongue, but I never expected her to use it like a weapon against me. Not like this. After she got Simone's letter. After it became real that she and Lawrence were out of the will. She didn't grieve, she didn't apologize. He went on the attack. First it was whispers at church. I heard from Sister Monroe that Candace was telling folks I was being influenced, that I was showing signs of decline, and no longer capable of making sound decisions. I let it go. I figured it would blow over. Then she started showing up. The first time she just stood in my driveway, shouting, red-faced, hair wild, clutching some crumpled paper in her fist. You think you can just cut us off? After everything we've done for you? She screamed loud enough for my neighbor to come out and look. I didn't open the door. I just sat at the window recording her on my phone while she ranted and raved like a woman possessed. You sat on millions while we struggled to pay for our kids' tuition. We deserve that money, Martha. It's not just yours. It's family money. Lawrence stayed in the car the whole time. Didn't get out. Didn't say a word. Just stared at the dashboard like it had all the answers. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A week later it got worse. I was attending a Wednesday night prayer circle. Quiet, respectful, mostly the elders. We were praying over Sister Coleman's surgery when I heard the doors burst open. It was Candace. She stormed down the aisle in boots and fury, her voice echoing like thunder across the sanctuary. Y'all think this woman is some innocent saint? She's hiding money. Millions. She's been lying to everyone. And now she's cut us off like we're nothing. The room fell dead silent. No one moved. Even the pastor froze. I stood slowly. I didn't say a word. I reached into my purse and turned my phone camera on again. Steady. Come. You let her spin this little story about being the victim, Candace spat. But she's bitter. She's spiteful. And she's not right in the head. Pastor tried to escort her out, but Candace shook him off. She's got money she never told anyone about. She's rewriting wills like a madwoman. This is elder fraud. And I will be getting my husband's inheritance. Lawrence wasn't even there. Just her. Just hate. They finally got her out the building, but the damage was done. I stayed. I finished the prayer. I even brought out the banana pudding I'd baked for after. But inside me, something settled. Something heavy. Not anger, grief. This woman had married my son. Held my grandchildren. Called me mama once. And now she was clawing at the air, trying to snatch what wasn't hers, slandering my name like I'd stolen something from her. I went home and handed the video to Simone. This is enough, I told her. She nodded. Then let's bury this once and for all. The next week I got served. Candace had filed a guardianship petition. Claimed I was mentally unfit. That I was being manipulated. That I needed a legal conservator to protect me. And by that she meant control me. Simone wasn't surprised. They're trying to force access to your estate, she said. But don't worry. We're ready. Court day came fast. I wore navy blue. Ironed my blouse twice. Samuel always said I looked sharp in navy. Candace sat on one side, her face pinched with smugness. Lawrence sat beside her, quiet as ever. The judge called me to the stand first. Simone, calm and methodical, presented my mental health evaluations, signed by 2 independent doctors, and then the video footage. The grainy images of Candace in my driveway, then her voice booming with accusations in the church. It filled the courtroom. When Candace took the stand, she was initially confident, delivering her practice speech about my supposed decline and her husband's birthright. But Simone's cross-examination was like a surgeon's scalpel. Mrs. Evans, Simone asked, her voice even but firm after Candace claimed deep concern for my well-being, can you explain how publicly accusing your mother-in-law of being not right in the head in a church and attempting to seize her assets aligns with that concern, rather than, say, financial opportunism? Candace faltered, her arguments unraveling under Simone's precise questioning. The judge raised an eyebrow when Candace insisted, she's not in her right mind, we're family. We're owed. That was her mistake. Because no one in that courtroom heard love in her voice. They heard greed. The judge ruled in my favor. Declared me mentally fit. Threw out the petition. Warned Candace against filing again. And as I walked out of that courtroom, I passed by my son. He still wouldn't look me in the eye. He just sat there letting his wife drag my name through the dirt. The days that followed the court's decision were quiet, but the undercurrents in our small community were strong. Candace's public displays had not gone unnoticed. By the time Easter approached, the whispers about her behavior had solidified into a general disapproval. After her outburst in the sanctuary and the subsequent court case, the pastor, a man of gentle but firm conviction, had quietly suggested to Lawrence that perhaps it was best they step down from the church's finance board. They had without public protest, but their absence was noted. The community, while slow to speak openly, had its ways of showing its stance. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had died. Not my dignity. Not my peace. It was the part of me that used to hope he might come back. That he might remember who raised him. But after everything, that part was gone. Winter slowly gave way, the days growing longer, though a chill remained in my heart where that hope had been. And all that was left now was a desire for closure. It was spring when Lawrence finally knocked on my door again. I hadn't seen him since the court hearing, the one where his wife tried to take control of my estate like I was some broken marionette, and he just sat there, silent, watching me fight alone, like a boy too ashamed to speak, too weak to stand. This time he stood on the porch with a bouquet of yellow tulips in one hand and nothing rehearsed in the other. No script. No excuses. Just a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. I opened the screen door slowly. "Hi, Ma." I didn't answer. He shifted his feet. "I'm not here to defend her. I need to apologize. For myself." That gave me pause. "I should have stood up for you," he said, his voice trembling. "At church. In court. At home. Everywhere. I saw what she was doing. I just let it happen. I told myself it would calm down, that you were tough, that you could handle her. But that was cowardly. And it was wrong." I looked at his face, older than I remembered. Not because of time. Because of shame. "I was raised better," he said softly. That's when I stepped aside. He walked in like a man entering a funeral, quiet, cautious, unsure of what to do with his hands. I didn't make him sit. I didn't make coffee. I just turned and looked him in the eye. "You watched her call me trash," I said. "You sat there while she tried to take everything your father left me. You never told her to stop." "I know," he whispered. "I didn't stop her because I thought I'd lose her. But I lost you instead. There was truth, raw and heavy between us. I forgive you," I said, "because you're my son. And because I still see the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap after church." His shoulders dropped. His eyes watered. "But hear me now, Lawrence," I continued. "She will never step foot in this house again. Not for a meal, not for a holiday, not to pretend like she didn't drag my name through court and God's house. You are welcome. The children are welcome. But Candace Evans is not." He didn't argue. He nodded. He knew better than to try. We talked for a while. About the kids. About Zoe's science fair. About how Madison was taking up photography. About Brandon's voice changing and how he didn't know what to do with it. I asked if they still talked about me. He smiled. They never stopped. They love you. They didn't know all the details perhaps, but they knew something broke that night in church, and they sensed who dropped the hammer. They don't understand everything that happened, but they know Candace crossed a line. Madison told me she missed your banana pudding. Brandon said the scarf you made him is still in his drawer. I pressed my fingers to my lips to keep from crying. Before he left, I handed him 3 envelopes. Give these to the children on their birthdays this year. I don't need them waiting for lawyers or paperwork. I want them to hear my heart now. He took them like they were glass. As I watched him walk away, a different kind of quiet settled over me. Forgiveness, I realized, didn't mean forgetting or even full reunion with the life we once had. It meant release. And that day, watching my son carry a fragile hope for the future, I let go of the last bitter dregs of that Christmas Eve, for good. That Sunday, I returned to church for the first time in weeks. People greeted me with soft smiles, gentle hugs. A few whispered apologies for not speaking up sooner. The awkwardness of the recent past was still there, but so was a sense of quiet solidarity. Candace and Lawrence were no longer on the finance board, their absence a silent testament to the fallout. Their names still echoed in pew whispers, but it was Candace's that drew the longest stares. Later that month I hosted a Sunday supper. Just me, Lawrence, and the grandchildren. Candace wasn't invited. When he asked if she could drop the kids off, I told him, she can pull up to the sidewalk. But she stays in the car. And that's what she did. I peeked through the blinds as she sat behind the wheel, arms folded, sunglasses on. She didn't even look toward the house. The children ran inside like they used to when they were little. Shoes off, arms wide, voices loud. Zoe made a beeline for the kitchen. Brandon hugged me hard around the waist. Madison handed me a photo she'd taken of the sky, folded in a paper frame. It was like breathing again. We ate. We laughed. I told them stories about their grandfather, how he once caught a trout with his bare hands and screamed louder than I did. How he danced with me in the kitchen on nights when there was nothing in the fridge but love and cornbread. Before they left, I gave each of them a small, gold-embossed envelope. "What is it, Grandma?" Brandon asked. "Just a little key," I said. "To your future." Inside were letters and the first installment of their trust. Carefully written. With instructions. With protection. Lawrence watched from the hallway. I looked at him once. He didn't speak. He just mouthed, "Thank you," and I nodded. That night, I sat in Samuel's old chair and watched the house breathe again. No tension. No insults. No performance. Just peace. The money didn't make me powerful. What made me powerful was knowing who I was. What made me rich was everything they tried to take from me. My dignity, my voice, my family, and still finding a way to hold on. This is my home. These are my terms. And if anyone asks why Candace Evans can't come to Christmas ever again, I'll tell them. Because she mistook my silence for weakness. And now she knows better.